The long history of brickmaking, clay, kilns, and the architecture of patience, shaping earth into stone. When you look at the great monuments of the past, ziggurats in Mesopotamia, Roman aqueducts, medieval town walls, it is easy to be dazzled by scale. But behind these marvels lies one of the most mundane crafts in human history, brickmaking. For thousands of years, bricks have been shaped, dried, and fired, transforming simple clay into the backbone of cities. Brickmaking was never glamorous. It involved mud, sweat, smoke, and repetitive labor. Yet it was essential, providing a reliable building material wherever stone was scarce or costly. From the first sun-dried bricks of the ancient Near East to the fired bricks that paved Roman roads and built Gothic towers, the story of brickmaking is one of continuity, patience, and endurance. The origins of bricks. The earliest bricks were simple, lumps of clay mixed with straw or chaff, shaped in molds, and left to dry in the sun. Archaeological evidence from Mesopotamia shows such bricks as early as 7000 BCE. They were soft, fragile, and vulnerable to rain, but in dry climates they could last for centuries. Entire cities, including Ur and Babylon, were raised from these humble materials. The process was monotonous but effective. Workers mixed clay with water and straw, pressed it into wooden molds, and laid the bricks in rows to dry. Each step was repeated thousands of times, producing bricks by the tens of thousands. The survival of entire civilizations depended on this repetition. From sun to fire. The innovation of fired brick came later, when builders discovered that clay hardened permanently when baked at high temperatures. Kilns allowed bricks to become more durable, able to withstand rain and frost. Fired bricks expanded the possibilities of architecture, making bridges, sewers, and multi-story buildings feasible. But fired bricks required greater effort. Kilns had to be constructed, fuel gathered, and temperatures maintained. The work of brickmakers was thus a constant cycle, shaping clay by day, stoking kilns by night, recording deliveries in ledgers. The monotony of the process made possible the permanence of cities. Brickmaking as seasonal labor. In many societies, brickmaking was seasonal. Clay was easiest to work after rains softened the earth, and sun-drying required warm weather. Thus, spring and summer were often peak times. Villagers might devote weeks to shaping and drying bricks, stacking them in neat rows. Seasonal rhythms appear in records. In Mesopotamian tablets, deliveries of bricks are tallied after the harvest, when labor was available. In medieval Europe, accounts show towns hiring masons and brickmakers in summer months, stockpiling bricks for construction in autumn. This seasonal pattern tied brickmaking to the cycles of agriculture. Bricks were not only shaped from the earth, but also from the rhythm of rural labor. Organization and records. Brickmaking, though simple in concept, required organization. Clay had to be quarried, molds distributed, kilns fueled, and deliveries recorded. In large projects, palaces, temples, fortifications, entire bureaucracies oversaw brick production. Mesopotamian records list quotas of bricks demanded from workers. A single tablet might record 10,000 bricks for the Temple of Inanna, delivered by so-and-so. Egyptian papyri detail supplies of straw for mixing with clay. Roman inscriptions record brick stamps, marking ownership and date of production. These records are monotonous, filled with numbers and names, but they show the scale of effort. Each brick, identical and unremarkable on its own, was part of a vast system of labor and accounting. Brickmakers at work. The life of a brickmaker was one of repetition. Day after day, hands plunged into clay, lifted molds, leveled surfaces, and set bricks in the sun. The work was dirty, exhausting, and poorly paid. And yet, brickmakers were essential. Without them, walls could not rise, sewers could not drain, and markets could not be paved. Their anonymity contrasts with the permanence of their work. Few brickmakers' names survive, but their bricks endure in walls that still stand after millennia. Sometimes their marks do survive. Roman bricks often bear stamps identifying the workshop or estate where they were made. These stamps, dull in appearance, are treasures for historians, linking surviving walls to ancient economies. Reflection. When you picture a medieval or ancient city, imagine not only the walls and towers, but also the rows of drying bricks, the smoke of kilns rising, the quiet monotony of laborers shaping clay. Each brick represents not genius or inspiration, but patience and repetition. And yet, one wonders, if bricks were so essential and so widely used, how did different societies balance the tedium of their production with the grandeur they achieved? Did the workers who shaped the mud see their labor reflected in the monuments that rose from it? Or did the bricks simply disappear into the anonymity of walls? Brickmaking in Rome and the Middle Ages, kilns, trade, and the cycle of repairs. The simple act of shaping clay into bricks did not change much over millennia, but the organization around brickmaking did. In empires and kingdoms, bricks became not just building blocks, but part of a regulated economy, subject to oversight, taxation, and standardization. From the bustling brickyards of imperial Rome to the modest kilns of medieval towns, the story of brickmaking in this period is one of routine labor magnified by bureaucracy. Rome, the empire of bricks. Roman architecture is often remembered for stone and marble, but in reality, much of Rome was built of brick. Fired bricks, stamped with workshop marks, formed the skeletons of aqueducts, baths, warehouses, and insulae, apartment buildings that housed the city's growing population. Marble and stone were often veneers laid over brick cores. Brick production in Rome was highly organized. Large estates along the Tiber and in the countryside operated kilns, turning out tens of thousands of bricks each season. Each brick bore a stamp, naming the workshop and often the consulship year, a kind of bureaucratic timestamp. These stamps, monotonous though they seem, are a goldmine for historians. By comparing them, scholars can trace the movement of materials and the growth of building projects across the empire. The stamps reveal a rhythm. Workshops named after freedmen, soldiers, or imperial estates, each delivering quotas of bricks to construction sites. The work was not glamorous, but it sustained the empire's infrastructure. Kilns and smoke. The heart of brickmaking was the kiln. A Roman or medieval kiln was not elegant. A domed or rectangular structure of clay and stone, with chambers for fire below and stacks of bricks above. Workers fed fuel, wood, brush, or even dung into the fire chambers, maintaining steady heat for days. The monotony of kiln tending was exhausting. Temperatures had to remain consistent. Too low, and bricks crumbled. Too high, and they cracked. Workers shoveled fuel day and night, sleeping in shifts, smoke clinging to their clothes. The smell of kilns permeated the outskirts of cities. In Rome, smoke from brickyards hung over districts near the Tiber. In medieval towns, kilns were often banished to the edges of settlements to reduce fire risk, yet their presence was unmistakable. Piles of clay, stacks of drying bricks, and the haze of smoke rising in the distance. Regulations and standards. Because brickmaking was so important, states and guilds imposed regulations. In Rome, the imperial administration monitored production, ensuring bricks met certain dimensions. Inscriptions and laws mention penalties for using substandard materials, reflecting the empire's reliance on durable construction. In the Middle Ages, guilds of brickmakers and masons developed similar rules. Records from northern Italy, for instance, prescribed standard brick sizes and kiln practices. Inspectors checked bricks before use, rejecting warped or brittle ones. Fines for poor workmanship were common. The records are dry. So-and-so fined for crooked bricks. A mason reprimanded for using soft bricks in a public wall. Yet they reveal how quality was enforced not by innovation, but by repetition and oversight. Trade in bricks. Though bricks are heavy and fragile, they were traded. In Rome, barges carried bricks down the Tiber to construction sites in the city. Archaeological finds show stamped bricks from workshops miles away used in central Rome. In medieval Europe, some cities imported bricks from nearby towns when local clay was scarce. Transport was costly, so most bricks were made near where they were used. Still, the movement of bricks created networks of trade and obligation. A city wall, for example, might incorporate bricks from dozens of workshops, each recorded in contracts and receipts. The paperwork of brick trade survives in fragments. Charters listing deliveries, accounts of barges carrying loads, and complaints about shortages. These documents rarely mention the workers themselves, but they show the steady flow of material that fed construction. The cycle of repairs. Bricks did not last forever. Walls cracked, pavements wore down, and floods eroded structures. Repair was constant. Cities employed masons and laborers year-round to patch walls, rebuild arches, and replace paving. In Rome, bricks from ruined buildings were recycled. Ancient accounts describe scavengers stripping old walls, cleaning bricks, and reselling them. In the Middle Ages, similar practices continued. Old bricks, weathered and irregular, were stacked alongside new ones, their mismatched appearance still visible in surviving walls. Repair accounts are strikingly repetitive. A single town's ledger might list, year after year, payment to masons for repairing the bridge, payment for 200 bricks to repair the church wall, payment for kiln fuel. Each entry a reminder of the dull persistence required to keep structures standing. Brick and identity. In some regions, brick came to define local identity. In northern Italy and the Low Countries, brick Gothic churches rose where stone was scarce. Their red and brown facades still dominate skylines. In parts of Germany, entire towns were built of brick, their walls and towers giving a uniform appearance. These identities were not the result of sudden inspiration, but of necessity. Clay was abundant, stone was not. Communities adapted by investing in brick production, developing distinctive styles over generations. The monotony of local brickyards became the mark of civic pride. The workers' lives, though their names rarely survive, brickmakers were ordinary laborers, peasants supplementing income, craftsmen bound to guilds, or slaves in Roman estates. Their work was hard and repetitive, their pay modest. Yet they sustained the cities that still stand today. Occasionally, workers left marks, fingerprints impressed in clay, children's handprints on drying bricks, doodles scratched into surfaces. These accidental traces humanized the monotony, reminding us that behind the endless lists and stamps were real people shaping mud with their hands. Reflection. As you imagine brickyards outside Rome, or kilns smoking beyond medieval town walls, think of the monotony. Clay dug and shaped, bricks stacked to dry, kilns stoked night after night. Think of the ledgers recording deliveries, the inspectors rejecting flawed bricks, the masons patching walls year after year. Brickmaking was not dramatic, but it was foundational. Without it, aqueducts, baths, churches, and walls would never have risen. And yet, one must wonder, if bricks required such constant effort to produce and maintain, what drove communities to persist with them instead of abandoning construction altogether? Was it necessity, habit, or the quiet pride of leaving something enduring behind? Brick by brick? Decline, transformation, and the legacy of brickmaking. The craft of brickmaking endured for millennia with little change. Clay, molds, drying, kilns, repairs. But like many ancient trades, it eventually transformed under the weight of industrialization. By the 19th century, the rhythm of hand-shaped bricks and smoke-filled kilns gave way to machines, steam power, and mass production. The humble brick, once shaped by countless hands, became standardized, cataloged, and sold by the million. This transformation did not erase the past. Instead, it left layers of continuity and change. Old brick walls reused, traditional kilns lingering in rural corners, and modern cities built on the same clay foundations as ancient Ur or Rome. Early modern shifts. Even before industrialization, changes were underway. In Renaissance Italy, brick production expanded to match the demand for palaces and fortifications. Regulations became more detailed, prescribing exact sizes and firing methods. In the Low Countries in Germany, brick Gothic styles emphasized uniformity, pushing brickmakers toward more careful standardization. Yet these developments were still rooted in old rhythms. Clay was dug by hand, molded in wooden frames, dried in the sun, and fired in kilns. Records from the 16th and 17th centuries repeat the same formulas as medieval accounts. Payment for 3,000 bricks, for fuel, for masons to lay them. The monotony of the trade persisted, even as architecture grew more elaborate, industrialization and machines. The real transformation came with the Industrial Revolution. In the 18th and 19th centuries, inventors developed machines that could press clay into uniform shapes far faster than hand molds allowed. Continuous kilns, fueled by coal, allowed bricks to be fired in vast numbers without the stop-and-start rhythm of traditional kilns. Production scaled up dramatically. A single factory could produce millions of bricks each year, feeding the expansion of industrial cities. London, Berlin, and New York grew brick by brick, their endless rows of housing made possible by mechanized production. For brickmakers, this meant both opportunity and displacement. Some found steady work in factories, tending machines and kilns. Others saw their traditional craft marginalized, their small brickyards unable to compete with industrial output. The records of the period reflect this shift. Instead of guild fines for crooked bricks, we find factory ledgers recording tons of coal consumed, bricks shipped by rail, and wages paid to workers on a weekly basis. The monotony remained, but it was now written in columns of industrial accounts. The brick in modern cities. By the 19th century, bricks had become the quintessential material of modern urban life. Industrial housing blocks, factories, warehouses, and schools were almost universally made of brick. Their uniform appearance reflected the uniform production that supplied them. In Britain, entire neighborhoods of terraced houses rose, their red brick facades stretching endlessly along city streets. In the United States, industrial towns grew from rows of brick mills and worker housing. In continental Europe, the expansion of railways, stations, and civic buildings left a legacy of brick that still defines many cityscapes. The monotony of bricks mirrored the monotony of industrial life, rows upon rows, each identical, forming the backdrop to daily routines. Decline and persistence. By the 20th century, new materials began to challenge brick. Concrete and steel offered greater strength and speed of construction. Glass and aluminum reshaped skylines. Many brickyards closed, their kilns abandoned. Yet brick never disappeared. Its familiarity, durability, and modest beauty kept it alive. Even today, bricks are produced in vast numbers, though often by mechanized factories rather than hand labor. In many places, traditional brickmaking lingers on, especially in rural areas or in parts of the world where industrial methods are less accessible. The persistence of brick is a reminder that the most boring materials often endure. Stone monuments may crumble, but walls of clay, baked into brick, can last millennia. Archaeology of bricks. For historians and archaeologists, Bricks themselves are records. Roman stamps reveal the names of estates, freedmen, and officials who oversaw production. Medieval bricks, irregular in size, testify to local variation and craft traditions. Industrial bricks, uniform and stamped with factory names, chart the expansion of modern economies. Sometimes, bricks carry accidental traces, fingerprints pressed into wet clay, animal tracks across drying rows, even children's handprints immortalized in fired surfaces. These small details pierce the monotony, reminding us of the individuals whose lives were shaped by shaping clay. The symbolism of brick. Beyond utility, bricks have acquired symbolic meaning. They represent endurance, stability, and humility. Proverbs speak of brick by brick as the image of slow, steady progress. Revolutions have used bricks both literally, as barricades, and figuratively, as symbols of the working classes. In literature, bricks often evoke monotony, the endless rows of factory housing, the dull repetition of industrial streets. Yet they also carry a quiet dignity, the small, ordinary unit that makes great things possible. Reflection. As you picture the long arc of brickmaking, from sun-dried lumps on Mesopotamian plains to the endless red rows of industrial cities, you see a story not of innovation but of persistence. The craft changed slowly, its monotony enduring across millennia. Think of the workers at Kilns outside Rome, stoking fires in the night. Think of medieval brickmakers stacking rows to dry in summer sun. Think of factory workers feeding machines that pressed clay into millions of identical shapes. All of them part of a chain stretching across history, anonymous yet essential. And so you might ask, in a world now dominated by concrete, steel, and glass, what does it mean that so much of our past still rests on clay shaped by hand? Is the story of brick making a tale of obsolescence? Or is it a reminder that the most ordinary, boring materials may prove the most enduring of all?